I remember most. The many improvements that's been made, and the better equipment we've had, the better working conditions in our building. And in the last few years, we have been able to increase the salaries enough that we have been able to get more educated people and more qualified people to actually furnish the people with a qualified police service that they deserve.
How did you get into police work yourself?
Well, I was working for the city of Dallas in the engineering department, and I just had thought about it for a few months about coming over and going to work in the police department. So one day I just came over and asked Chief Claude Trammell for a job, and he gave it to me riding a motorcycle, and that was my first assignment.
Our organization is attempting to defeat it by providing a job for the hardcore unemployable, so that the child or the children that he begets will not grow up in an unemployable's home, and will grow up in a home where someone is working, and on that basis will learn to work himself. Know that that is the thing to do, rather than to follow the footsteps of his father where his father didn't work.
There's been a lot of talk from college students on the campus here at SMU as well as on other campuses. Now it's time to see if those students are ready to back up that talk with action. The Associated Women Students chapter here at SMU has set up a table in the Student Center, and they're inviting students from the Dallas area to come and register to vote. Now, this registering is conditional, of course, on the Supreme Court approving the 18-year-old vote as passed by Congress. But if they don't register by January 31st, even though there is no Supreme Court decision by that time, they will not be able to vote for all of next year, according to Texas law. We talked to Beverly Brooks, and Kathy Kenyon about why it's important for these 18-year-olds to vote.
Well, it's important because this shows their concern in their government, and since 18-year-olds have to pay, well, like from 16 on up, they have to pay Social Security taxes, and some have to go fight, and it's just not fair for them to do these things and not vote and not have a say in the government.
It'll be interesting to see just how much response there is to this appeal for registering to vote on the SMU campus. A recent study nationwide for U.S. News and World Report showed that students did not really participate where they did have the opportunity in certain states to vote at the age of 18 or 19. The same study also showed that the voting patterns of those students did not seem to change from the voting pattern of the adults in the same areas. This is Roger McDonald, Channel 8 News on the Move at SMU.
Well, I think it is turning around, and our indicators show that it certainly is. The rate of inflation is coming down steadily. Interest rates are down. They've just made another drop. Housing starts are way up, and there's a steady reversal of the inflationary trend. Now, we do have some problem with wages and prices. Some of the settlements that have come about lately have been inflationary. The White House issued an inflation alert today that pointed out some of the dangers in this regard. But I think on a steady basis, we can look for the economy to continue to improve. There isn't anything wrong with the American economy. There's nothing sick about our business structure. It's just a matter of a difficulty in reversing this psychological tendency to overrate the inflationary tenacity, that's all.
Well, why do we have to have the $15 billion deficit in the budget next year?
Well, that budget deficit is not a deficit when viewed in terms of full employment. The President has said in discussing budget deficits, and incidentally, I'm not ready to concede at this point the deficit's going to be that high. The President said on many occasions that a true deficit is one where the economy at full employment is not producing a surplus. And since we don't have full employment at the present time, when we get to full employment, the rate of governmental spending won't produce a deficit.
The Vice President's visit to Dallas indicates that there apparently is nothing to rumors that the administration has written off Texas because the Republicans showed little or no additional gains in the last election. This is Roger McDonald, Channel 8 News on the Move at Love Field.
Well, I think that's excellent, and I, throughout the campaign, stated that I thought we'd gone much too far in depending on monetary policies alone and trying to curb inflation. That I thought it ought to be a balanced approach, a fiscal and a monetary approach. And that means to try to work toward a balanced budget and with some moderation to work on monetary controls, but they'd gone much too far on that. So you'd had some severe dislocations, particularly in the housing industry. I'm delighted to see the cut in the rates.
Senator, one other question. Do you have any thoughts on wage and price controls? Is it too late, or would you like to see them?
I want very much to see them use job owning, to use voluntary wage and price guidelines. But it's not enough to have a commission, an independent commission that meets once every quarter to do what they call inflation alerts. I don't think this accomplishes anything.
We don't see any great urgency as far as immediate action. It's one that certainly does require our attention in one of our study and efforts, and it will receive it. But at this point, we don't see that property is endangered or that lives are endangered any more in this area than they are in numerous other areas in our city.
The residents of Holiday Hills, I'm sure, would take issue with that point, that lives are not endangered. I was told, and this is strictly hearsay on my part, that during the spring rainy season, when the runoff from that area is at a maximum, that ditch, as it now stands to be something like 30 feet wide, will often run with water up to 12 feet deep. Is that a reality? Is that practical? And if so, wouldn't that represent a danger to children there?
That itself in the statement would represent, yes. However, it's true that that is an exception rather than a rule. This particular drainage area has very little obstructions in it, and water does flow through it at a rapid pace. So from the times that we do get a heavy rain, our drain-off is quite rapid. And certainly in the times when it's up, I would think that people would have foresight enough to watch their children, not to let them get there. But I didn't mean to say that we're not concerned about the welfare of our children at all, for we are, just as we are everyone else. But it's also true that we have other drainage ditches through our city and in the hearts of residential areas that present the same problem.
We won't get a lot of help up off the freshman team of last year. However, we went out and we got four junior college kids that I feel like can play basketball. Now, the big problem is getting the boys to play together. They never have in their life. I mean, this is the first time they've ever played with each other. Getting the boys to understand exactly what I want. This is always the problem with the junior college kid, and meshing him into what you're trying to do. And there is an old wives' tale, I hope it's a wives' tale, that says you never get anything out of a junior college boy his first year, and but the second year he will help you. Well, if that's true, we've had it, because we have 4 junior college kids, and I'm counting on them.
Here in Fort Worth, psilocybin has been around for at least a year, but the drug is not being used to any great extent. School Superintendent Julius Truelson says the biggest problems among students now are still marijuana and diet pills. In a meeting at the Fort Worth Public Schools gymnasium, Truelson admitted freely that the current drug abuse program is a failure. He said that students who use drugs know that it's wrong.
Without exception, every pupil who's been apprehended for the use of drugs have stated they knew that it was harmful, that it was illegal, against all rules and regulations, and that their parents opposed their use of these drugs. Therefore, it's not a question did they know, it was a question of why they did it.
Truelson continued that any prevention program will fail without the support of the students themselves. So now the administration is asking members of the student councils to submit recommendations on how to combat drug abuse. It's an effort to see if the young can succeed where the old have failed. Jay Lewis, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
Well,
we have no indication that the Southern case has brought about pressure. I think you're aware of the fact that there has been an investigation of our representation of Brent Stein, and that certainly can be considered pressure.
I know the Southern boy, according to the court, did own his own automobile, and there was a question there as to whether or not he qualified as being poor.
That's still before the court, and I can't comment on it.
Are you having difficulty in determining who's poor and who isn't at times?
No, we're not.
What is your criteria for accepting a client? I'm poor?
that's part of the criteria. The lawyers in this program are gravely concerned about the meaning of Mr. Rumsfeld's action in firing Lenzner and Jones, and by resolution have today unanimously urged him to reinstate the two men, to reaffirm OEO's commitment to the integrity of the attorney-client relationship, and to restate OEO's belief in the concept of law and order for all, including legal justice for the poor.
Do you possibly fear that your taking this position today will result in your being fired?
No, I do not.
Are you part of this group that is organizing the bus trip to Washington, D.C. to visit Congress?
I'm not part of the group, but I certainly support that action. I understand that that groups of our clients are organizing a trip to Washington to contact their congressman and to demonstrate their concern about the threats being made to legal services.
At a time when Dallas Legal Services is possibly hurting for funds, why would you spend funds in this manner?
We do not plan to spend any of the project funds in this manner.
Do you feel that today's blast by President Nixon against the auto unions is going to have some adverse effect on your party?
Well, I don't consider what the President said today as a blast against the auto unions. The other party has been asking for some time that he put the pressures of presidential jawboning to any wage settlements that he feels might be inflationary. And of course, this particular settlement, looked at very impartially, has certain inflationary tendencies. He was simply alluding to that fact in response to the exhortations of the Democratic Party. And I think that what he had to say was very restrained under the circumstances.
You mentioned endorsing the President's actions in trying to wind down the war in Vietnam. Then do you endorse the President's action in renewing bombing above the DMZ?
Well, I think that this was on a temporary basis and on selected targets, and on that I would not differ with him.
Then you do endorse that action?
From what I know of it from the press, and that's all I know. Let me say this, that I asked the President to arrange briefings for me on Vietnam, on the Middle East, on the SALT talks, on our defense posture. And Dr. Kissinger has done that, and I'm to have those briefings in the very near future. And I feel that I'll be a little better informed then than I am now.